asked how that was going, and it occurred to him to check something in my rear. And when he pushed on a certain spot, he said, yeah, that hurts. So he came to the conclusion that my that what I need is not a shot in my hip, but a shot at this muscle. He says very rare. He says only after you eliminate everything else. But that seemed, he says this muscle tightens up around the sciatic nerve. So
piriformis muscle is in your hiney and it compresses the sciatic nerve. But he said they'll always check everything else first because they're more common.
but he just had a patient there that morning who had had the shot a couple days ago. And so it was fresh on his mind. And so thank the Lord that hopefully will be the solution. So I had to cancel the other stuff and try to set up an appointment to see the person. And you know, it's going to be the same doctor that started the shot, only the shot in the back before. Now he's going to do a little bit different area, but yeah. And I'm thinking about even, yeah, some of the exercises I was given to do actually would tighten the muscles. And so anyway, so we'll see. Appreciate your prayers. Yeah. All right. We're in the Gospel of Luke, chapter 13. I had hoped to finish chapter 13 today. I'm not sure if that's going to happen or not. We'll see. Maybe we'll just go fast. Chapter 13, and we're in the section verses 31 to 35. So if we're able to complete that, we will finish the chapter today, start 14 next week. All right, so one way of looking at this section, somebody's titled it Jerusalem that rejects or Jerusalem that welcomes. You know, looking at the choices there. The following event sets the tone for the transition to follow in this journey section, because 14 is going to continue this journey toward Jerusalem. But from this point on, Jesus spends more time teaching his disciples about facing rejection and prepares them for the hard road of the discipleship, which he has alluded to before. I think another way of looking at this is farewell to the theocracy, because Jesus is laying it on the line here as what's going on. So verse 31, just at that time, some Pharisees approached, saying to him, go away, leave here, for Herod wants to kill you. What Herod is this? Here's the warning. So we're calling this the warning of the Pharisees. Not very pithy, but it's descriptive. Who is Herod? Anybody know how many Herods are there? The number of Herods in the New Testament. Anybody know which one this is? Right, Herod Antipas. You have it in a note? Because very few people would have that roll off the top of their heads. And just to give you a quick overview of the Herodian family, Herod the Great was the one that was the first in the family to be declared king by the Romans. He was the one that tried to kill baby Jesus. And then he had a number of sons. It'd be fun to go into the history of these guys, but we won't do that. Herod Antipas is one of the sons of Herod the Great. And when Herod the Great died, the territories that Herod the Great had ruled over were divided between several sons. And so Herod Antipas got the area of Galilee and Perea. So you can see there in the green, Galilee, Perea is where Herod Antipas ruled, primarily Galilee. And of course, that's the area in which Jesus grew up and where he ministered mostly. And so if we think ahead to the trial of Jesus, remember he's before Pilate, and Pilate hears that Herod Antipas is in town, and knowing that Jesus came from that area, he sent him to Herod for a trial. And then of course he got sent back. So that's the Herod, so that we know who it is that we're talking about. All right, but what's going on here? The Pharisees warning Jesus of danger from Herod. Anybody else say that does not compute? Seems totally out of character, doesn't it? Dr. Darrell Bach observes that this doesn't make much sense. And he continues, while their statement looks like one of concern, it is really expedient. Now, you got to know that the Pharisees aren't concerned about the health of Jesus, right? Alfred Edersheim posits that their suggestion that Jesus should depart could only have proceeded from a ruse to get him out of Perea, where evidently his works of healing were largely attracting and influencing the people. Dr. Dwight Pentecost, Dallas Theological Seminary, suggests that they wanted to get him to Jerusalem, where he would come under the authority of the Sanhedrin, away from the jurisdiction of Herod Antipas. So that kind of makes sense. It's the only explanation that seems to make sense to me as to why they would tell him, you got to get out of here, Herod's after you. Any comments or questions? All right. The reply of Jesus, verses 32 to 33. And he said to them, go tell that fox, behold, I cast out demons and perform cures today and tomorrow, and the third day I reach my goal. Nevertheless, I must journey on today and tomorrow and the next day, for it cannot be that a prophet would perish outside of Jerusalem. So, what's this thing about calling Herod a fox? Well, today, of course, that word has a different connotation. Call somebody a fox. That's usually some kind of a compliment. But in this case, it's not. We find foxes referenced a number of times in the Old Testament. Song of Songs, catch the foxes for us, the little foxes that are ruining the vineyards while our vineyards are in blossom. So in the Old Testament, fox is seen as a dangerous and cunning animal that destroys and scavenges. In Jesus' day, they were that, but they also were viewed as being rather insignificant. And I think that's the meaning that Jesus is relating here. The Pharisees thought that they were putting fear into the heart of Jesus by referencing a threat by Herod Antipas. Ooh, watch out, Herod Antipas is after you. But Jesus casts this aside by asserting that Antipas is insignificant. He's just a fox. Who cares? And then Jesus goes on to say, I'm casting out demons, performing cures today and tomorrow. And the third day I reach my goal. What's he mean by that? Today, tomorrow, and the third. That doesn't literally mean he's only going to be there 3 days, or in 3 days he's going to be in Jerusalem. That was a euphemism for a short period of time. An example of this is in Hosea 6, 1 and 2, which says, come, let us return to the Lord, for he has torn us, but he will heal us. He has wounded us, but he will bandage us. He will revive us after 2 days. He will raise us up on the third day, that we may live before him. So that just means a short period of time. So when Jesus says, I'm doing all these miracles today, tomorrow, and the third day I'm going to be in Jerusalem, basically, he's just saying it's going to be a short period of time. I'm going to get there. You guys are trying to get me there now. I'm going to get there soon, believe me. But right now, I'm performing miracles here in Perea. Interesting, the word used that's translated in NASB, at least, I reach my goal. Any other ways that's translated in your text? Finish my course. Yeah, it comes from teleos, which means to bring to perfection or to reach the end. It's the same root of the word that Jesus uses on the cross when he says, it is finished. So Jesus is saying that he is going to finish the course here pretty soon. He's going to come to the completion of his ministry. But his point is that he is independent of the plots and schemes of both Herod and the Pharisees. You know, they want him on their timetable. He says, no, I'm on my own timetable. I'll get there when I get there, and it won't be long. So Jesus could feel secure against the threats of Herod Antipas, firstly, because the time of his death had been predetermined by God. The mission of Jesus will be completed. God is in control. Nothing occurs by accident, but by design. And this should always bring us hope as well. Verse 33, nevertheless, I must journey on today and tomorrow and the next day. So we have that same idea shortly. I'm going to be doing this shortly. I want to focus for a second on I must journey. Literally, it is necessary to me to journey on today and tomorrow. Why is it necessary? Because that's God's timetable. That's the divine necessity. It's necessary for Jesus to do what he's doing because God had determined that that's what he would be doing and when he will get there. And then this next phrase is the answer of Jesus to the Pharisees. For it cannot be that a prophet would perish outside of Jerusalem. Cannot be. Now, this is not to conclude that no prophets were ever executed outside of Jerusalem, for they had. Jesus is simply pointing out that it's not accepted, it's inadmissible, which is a severely ironical indictment of Jerusalem, if you think about it. He meant that since Jerusalem had killed prophets, it was appropriate for him to die there too, but of all places. John Calvin comments, what a dreadful example was it that a place which had been chosen to be the sanctuary of divine worship and the residence of the law and of heavenly wisdom should be polluted not by one or another murder, but by a regular butchery of the prophets. Did you catch that? I hope you did, because I don't want to read that whole thing again. Jesus could feel secure against the threats of Herod Antipas, secondly, firstly, because the time is in God's hands. Secondly, because God had appointed the place where he was to be crucified as a sacrifice for the sin of the world. All right, any comments to that point? Through verse 33. All right, verse 34 and 35, we have the lament of Jesus. Oh, Jerusalem, Jerusalem, the city that kills the prophets and stones those sent to her. Now, what do you know about when Jesus repeats a name? Jerusalem, Jerusalem. We've seen that before. What does that indicate? It's significant, and pay attention. And in this case, because of the tone, and we've seen that in other places, because of the tone that you can imagine here, what is the significance of him repeating Jerusalem, Jerusalem? What? Passionate, yeah. Now, passionate can go one of two ways. Passion can be really positive or it can be negative, which is this. You can tell by what comes after, right? So this is what might be called a lament in the Psalms, for example, another Old Testament literature. And so he's expressing his emotion and pain. David does the same thing concerning Absalom. Remember that? Absalom, Absalom. You know, this is a lament of painful emotion. And notice too that as we look at this verse and what follows here, that you can tell that this is really Yahweh speaking, because the things that he says here. So Jesus is speaking as Yahweh here. Oh, Jerusalem, Jerusalem. Now, why does he bring up the stones? Stoning was the punishment for blasphemy. See, that's why I was kind of curious that they took Jesus to be crucified, because they accused him of blasphemy. They should have taken him out and stoned him. And we could talk about why they didn't do that, but a primary reason is so the scripture would be fulfilled, right? Not a bone would be broken. If they stoned him, all his bones would be broken, presumably. Other times, yeah. At the very beginning of his ministry, In Nazareth, yeah, they wanted to throw him off the edge of the cliff. Well, what do you? Yeah, yeah. And then he goes on with the lament. How often I wanted to gather your children together. So again, he's speaking as God here. He wanted to gather the children of Jerusalem together, just as a hen gathers her brood under her wings, and you would not. My, NASB adds have it, but you would not, I think is sufficient there. That's a common theme in the Old Testament. I know I have a number of verses that I won't read, but it refers to God wanting to gather Israel together like an eagle gathers over its young, and keeping Israel in the shadow of his wings, and so on. Now, a question that might arise, and I don't think we have time to really discuss it too much here, but how does such emotion fit with the sovereign plan of God, by which he chooses some for salvation and some for destruction? And it's one of those things where you have to say there are different levels of things going on, and here we have God lamenting, being emotionally saddened over the resistance of the leadership over centuries, but particularly right there in Jerusalem, resistance to him, and he is genuinely saddened by it, but at the same time, it's part of God's plan. Because you think about it, if they're not resistant, Jesus isn't crucified, and then there's no redemption. So, it's hard for our minds to put all these things together, but they're true nonetheless. And then because he pronounces judgment. Then once again, we've seen judgment over and over again in the last 3 or 4 chapters. Verse 35: Behold, your house is left to you. NASB adds desolate to communicate what he means here, but he literally says your house is left to you. Your house. What do you mean by your house? What's your house?
Be clear, wonderful place. And over this time, they had brought it to nothing.
Yeah.
And actually, a lot like today, where they're trying to get rid of all Christianity, they were trying to get rid of that at that time.
Yeah. So they actually had made. Well, let me go back to the question, and then I'll address what you just said. What did he mean by your house? They all weren't living in the same house, were they? What do you mean your house is left to you? It could be that, but I think more specifically the temple, because that's the focus in Jerusalem, isn't it? So and someone has said, if the temple of God is left without the God of the temple, then it is desolate indeed. And going to what Jim said, this is not only a judgment that God is going to be bringing upon them, but a judgment which they have brought about themselves, because in their rejection of God ruling over them, not just Jesus, but before this, they have made it desolate. They have made it to be nothing because they weren't following God. Darrell Bock says one of the tragedies of rejecting God's will is that people get what they ask for, including the dire circumstances or consequences. And of course, this recalls the painful era of exile. And we look at the Jeremiah and his lamenting. He's called a weeping prophet. He's lamenting over Jerusalem and over the Babylonian exile. And a number of things that Jesus has said in the last few weeks we've looked at are reminiscent of what the prophets said concerning Israel at the time that, first of all, the Assyrian conquering of the northern kingdom and the Babylonian conquering of the southern kingdom. And all the commentators I consulted, even the dispensationalists, stated that this, what Jesus is talking about here, was fulfilled by the invasion of Roman forces and destruction of Jerusalem in AD 70. For example, Dr. Thomas Constable from Dallas Seminary said, Jesus' lament recalls Jeremiah's lamentation over Jerusalem's destruction by the Babylonians. The city was heading for a similar fate under the Romans for rejecting Jesus. Then he says, you will not see me until the time comes when you say, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. This comes from Psalm 118, verse 26, which is part of the great Hallel. That is the group of psalms that were sung on the way to Jerusalem. The people at the temple would recognize the king, God as king, as they sought to enter the temple. And the question then arises, is he talking about the triumphal entry here, or is he talking about his second coming? And I would lean, at least because of the context, that he is saying, look, you guys want to get rid of me here to get me to Jerusalem. I'm going to get there shortly, but you're not going to see me again until you hear these words, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. So I think he's talking about the triumphal entry. This message is repeated in chapter 19, where the city's destruction is predicted as evidence of the judgment that will come upon this generation of the nation. And maybe we'll come back to this next week because there's a very instructive passage in the prophet Zechariah that I wanted us to read because it fits, just like we read in Amos before, it seemed to fit so well what's going on, Zechariah 2. And there's some verses in there that are specifically cited as prophecies of Messiah. So we'll look at that next week. Any concluding questions or comments? All right. Just in time for coffee. Yes. What verse are you talking about? Oh, 32. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, and the capitalization indicates that it's referring to deity. He as God. It's my goal. And the capitalization is not for emphasis, it's for indication of deity. Yeah. Yeah. But it is emphasized too, because like you said, it could have said I reach a goal, but it's my goal. Yeah. Yeah. It's a good point. All right. Get to be the first in line.